And we're off. Hi, gang. Welcome to latest episode of the All Dolphins podcast on this Monday, March 17th, 2025. Pleased to be joined today by Dave Hyde. See what I did there? St. Patrick's Day of the South Florida Sun Sentinel. David, laugh. It's come on. Give me a rim shot, at least something.
Someone's with a Scottish background. I'm not sure I can go that easily over to the Irish side. But is there really any difference? Let's put it in the big holding hands of the world picture. They're just same unit, just split into different countries. So
Both very cool accents, I will say. Uh, it is the start of the second week of NFL free agency, and we're going to be talking all of that today on this episode. As I mentioned, Dave Hyde, I was joking, stupid like that. I make silly jokes. Columnist for the South Florida Sun Sentinel, and who wrote a few days ago a somewhat complimentary column about the approach the Dolphins have taken in free agency so far, where it has been a lot of players. Dolphins are already up to it's 10 or 11. I'm losing track because my counting isn't that good. It's not a whole lot of big names. In fact, it's very few big names. No big contracts given out, but they're kind of filling out the roster.
yeah, I like their. I mean, austere. I called it reasonable, rational, considered, conservative, compared to previous years where they're making it rain money and I think this is what they had to do. They had to get younger, cheaper, healthier bodies in there. And you look at the first thing, the ages. Pretty much everybody is in the prime of their career still. Okay, that's important because they've taken some really dumb risks on injury riddled players and expensive risks. And they're look. There's always going to be risks in free agency, but the difference this time is they're low risk contracts for the most part, and that's the big difference as I see it. And they answered some, filled in the blanks with some things they weren't doing well. Um, Starting with short yardage, um, awful in short yardage the last couple of years. They get obviously a couple linemen. We'll see one starter for sure from Pittsburgh and James Daniels. They're banking on him. He's their big money guy, 8 million a year. But then you look at the wide receiver they got from Tennessee is a blocking wide receiver. The tight end they got is a blocking tight end, Pharaoh Brown. Then Alexander Madsen, the running back, he's a short yardage, the type of guy they haven't had on their roster for whatever reason. So, yeah, I mean, I like what they did within reason, knowing they got a lot of holes to fill.
Correct. And this is, to me, was about flushing out the roster in preparation for the draft, where they need to hit, as you mentioned. But the core and your guys that they're going to count on to lift this team in 2025, if the Dolphins are to be lifted, doesn't change. It's still Tua, Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, Zach Sealer, Jalen Ramsey, Jordan Brooks. Hopefully Calais Campbell comes back to the Dolphins. That's still a big mystery. Probably won't know that until maybe a couple of months, based on the fact that last year he didn't sign until June, and the first decision he has to make is, do I want to keep playing? I do want to make a point, though, point something out, and I wrote about this on Miami Dolphins on SI.com, is the Dolphins have this reputation for throwing money all over the place. They have. But in recent years, it's been at their own players or guys they acquired in trades who needed new contracts. Because I would challenge you to tell me in the past, counting this year, the past 3 free agency periods, the one big money free agent signing that they've made, and there isn't one. The most money is Jordan Brooks last year.
Yeah, well, I guess there was a organizational decision to go from building through the draft and about when they signed Tyreek Hill. And the next 2 years, now Bradley Chubb, they gave big money. Jalen Ramsey then only made him the highest paid cornerback.
I got my wife preparing in the background here.
They did it again.
Sorry.
And I think they've just been loose and undisciplined with their money. Okay, and how to in the team architecture. I mean, it's great for the players. God bless the players for making the money. Everybody's happy. You should be happy for players getting what they want, but it's a two-way street. The Dolphins have to get what they want too, and the team architect. That's why I did write the column, liking what they're doing in free agency, understanding that they got to kill it on the draft. But I also looked at all these holes that they got, and the self-scouting they done in recent years of letting more talent go out the door than to come in the door. And I said that Chris Greer's the Liam Eichenberg of general managers. I mean, you look at the way this has gone, and there's will the 10th year running the draft for Chris Greer be the charm? Is the question going into this draft, because he's got to kill it.
Can the argument not be made that he kind of semi-killed it in 2016, which was his first draft with Laramie Tunsil, Xavier Howard, Kenyon Drake, Jakeem Grant in round 6? That's a pretty good draft.
Okay, so you have to go back to his very first year.
Okay, well, yeah, now you're going to get technical on me here.
That's my point. The great organizations, even when they have a bad draft for them, it's still they're still plugging holes and they're still getting average players. I mean, in 10 years, you should be able to get, and this gets into me managing the team is just as bad by Chris as player procurement and decisions. You trade a Tunsil, and then it takes first round pick with and then a second and third with Liam Eichenberg, a first round with Austin Jackson, second, third Eichenberg. You have to pay big money to Ron Armstead, and then you have to use another second rounder and Patrick Paul to fill what you lost in Laramie Tunsil. So that's my point. Minka Fitzpatrick, how you're looking for two safeties now. First of all, you had two guys you let go, Deshaun Elliott and Brandon Jones, on the roster last year. Couldn't you have looked ahead and said, okay, we need to keep one of these guys? Let's make it at the right time, make a right contract offer to one of these guys where it'd be friendly for us, it'll be good for them. And that way we're not looking for two safeties in an off season. So again, roster management is something that they really lacked inside.
No, I agree. And in terms of fiscal responsibility, I would make the argument that they were last year in terms of free agents from other teams. They were not at all when it came to handing out extensions, which they did. We know the list: Tua, Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, Jalen Ramsey. And in the case of Tyreek, they didn't have to do anything with his contract. They had, he had 3 years left. The money wasn't guaranteed, and this was Tyreek wanting guaranteed money, which obviously he would, but the Dolphins relinquished the control there. And that's not necessarily a fiscally responsible situation. And then Jalen Ramsey was the same deal. He got more money, but he already had money and they already had guarantees, and nope, he did it again. It's twice they did his contract after they acquired him from the Rams. So you mentioned the fact that they mitigated the risks for the most part, and they certainly did with the James Daniel contract, because if he doesn't come back from his Achilles injury in 2025 to be the same guy he was with the Steelers before the injury, they can walk after 1 year, and the cap pain is very minimal. Kind of a risk with Zach Wilson, is it not, to give him $6 million guaranteed, considering the career he had with the Jets and the fact that he hasn't played a regular season game since he was with the Jets at Hard Rock Stadium?
Yeah, the risk isn't with these guys, to me, isn't financial. It is you're banking on them to do something this year. Okay. And that's a whole different risk. Would you be willing to take that? Would you? Zach Wilson was a surprise to me. I thought they'd take the safe way and get a guy with a portfolio of, he started, he's been benched, he's been up, he's been down. That's the type of guy you want as a veteran backup that would fit into this. Second quarter in week 7, Tua goes out. You need a guy who can come in there, read defenses immediately, and run the offense. And is that Zach? I don't know. you see a lot of times around the league, guys getting rehabilitated in their 1 year off, and he certainly wasn't a good place in Denver. Now, he was Denver's third quarterback,
Correct.
and that didn't change this offseason when Denver went out and decided to keep Jarrett Stidham instead of him. Or maybe he decided, I don't want to stay there. We're gonna have to wait till somebody talks about it, that exact situation. But the point being, the Dolphins are banking on him, and they're banking on Mike McDaniel again to make the right decision on a backup quarterback, and Chris Greer. I'm not letting anybody walk here. Okay.
Yeah.
And that Mike and Darren Bevel can rehabilitate him, or at least get him to where he can win a game if the season comes to that.
Yeah. That's quite the risk. And the last time they made a call with somebody who was semi unproven was last summer.
Yeah.
They went with Skylar Thompson, and we
Well, you
don't
could
know
go
how that played out. And we
you could
haven't
go
done.
the last 2 years, Alan, with Mike White and and Skylar Thompson, and neither of them really panned out at all.
No, but it turned out they didn't need Mike White in 2023 because that was the one season where Tua stayed healthy. I haven't done the research. I have to believe that there are not a whole lot of NFL quarterbacks whose first 3 seasons looked like Zach Wilson's first 3 seasons, and then saw their career take a big jump at some point.
Well, Sam Darnold. I mean, but now
Okay.
Sam Darnold went to Carolina, he went to San Francisco, went to Minnesota. Geno Smith. I mean, we can go through the ex-Jets quarterbacks who are really the story of this free agency period. Aaron Rodgers,
Aaron
Geno
Rodgers,
Smith, Sam
Tim
Darnold,
Boyle, Tim Boyle.
and Zach Boyle. Throw them in there. But it's hilarious. So the question becomes: look, you know the Jets are not the franchise you want to go to if
No.
in the last decade if you're a quarterback. But can Zach Wilson do a Sam Darnold, a much quicker U-turn perhaps than Sam Darnold?
Yeah, I will say this for the Dolphins though, that the quarterback market wasn't great to begin with, and then you have very quickly Andy, before even the free agency starts, Andy Dalton re-ups with Carolina. Then remember if it was before free agency started or right after, Jimmy Garoppolo re-ups with the Rams. So that's 2 good options right away. And if you look what's going on, you have 3 teams right now who are screaming for a quarterback: Cleveland, the Giants, and the Steelers. And it's Aaron, or in Minnesota to a certain degree, because right now they have JJ McCarthy's coming off the torn ACL last year. And it's like, okay, now the Steelers are looking at Joe Flacco, apparently. Jameis Winston visited the Giants, and who knows what's going on where. Russell Wilson is still out there. So it wasn't great, and we'll see how it works out. In terms of the other free agents the Dolphins signed, yeah, you mentioned Westbrook Akine, who's a guy I really like, because not only is he a good blocker, he's also got some size, can help in the red zone. Had 9 touchdown receptions last year, playing with Will Levis and Mason Rudolph at quarterback. So that's something pretty good. We should update it. On Monday, the Dolphins agreed to terms with former first-round pick cornerback Artie Burns, formerly of the University of Miami. This is a depth piece in a fabulous universe after 6 years or 7, 8 years of surviving in the NFL. Burns thrives and fills the need for the starting cornerback job opposite Jalen Ramsey. In the real world, he fights to make the 53-man roster and battles for a depth spot with Storm Duck, Ethan Bonner, Roy Cooper Jr., who they picked up from the Seahawks, and the 2 practice squad players from last year, Isaiah Johnson and Jason Maitre.
Yeah, the interesting thing with now I watched him at the University of Miami, and he was fast. I mean, he was the definition of speed, and he was a little undisciplined. There, you're talking to coaches, but he went in the NFL, had a nice run there. I'm curious how they plan to use him? Because they just hired a special team coach and they bring him in. Is there any chance he'll be a, you know, I don't even know his background. I know as a young player, he was a flyer on special teams. Now, does Craig Ackerman see any of that, or is this just sort of, we got to sign some cornerback there because there are spots we need help, and he's a veteran presence, so let's go and sign him.
It's building competition, basically. He played in his career, so it's 9 seasons, although he didn't play in 2020 as a torn ACL in 2020. So he's played 8 seasons, and he played more than 40% of the snaps on special teams 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times in his career. And he was a starter his first 2 years in Pittsburgh, then part-time starter in 2018. They did not extend the 5th-year option to him as a first-round pick. Remember, he was 25th overall, I think, in 2016, and then went to Chicago and then Seattle. So to me, the first step is going to be, does he make the roster? You mentioned Craig Ackerman, the special teams coordinator, and this brings up, I want to mention, don't necessarily talk a whole lot about punters. Dolphins signed Ryan Stonehouse. Kind of think that's the end for Jake Bailey. Is it a lock? No, maybe they'll have a competition, let the best man win. Usually, though, the second punter who's brought to camp is like a rookie free agent. It's another leg in camp, basically.
Well, especially when he has a background with the new special teams coach.
Certainly, and also, go ahead.
No, that's usually a tell. The guy's saying, "I want this guy to, to come in and be my punter, or at least I have a known quantity there for me if we're going to have a competition."
Okay, and I hate to be that guy, and I know some folks in the comments are going to say, "There he goes, have to piss on everything," because the good news, Ryan Stonehouse set an NFL record in 2022, single season highest average, 53.1, matched it the following year. Then, after a botched snap, trying to recover the ball, got his knee blown out, missed the end of the 2023 season.
Yeah.
And then came back last year, 50.1. So obviously he came back pretty well. So obviously he can kick it along this. However, you look at the net average, not good. The Dolphins got him as an unrestricted free agent because the Tennessee Titans refused to make him a qualifying offer as a restricted free agent. They could have done the right of first refusal for $3.3 million, which is what the Dolphins did with Cater Kohu. Declined to do so. The issue being, again, the net punting average is not great. The hang time last year, he was like 25th or that neighborhood. I wrote about it on Miami Dolphins on SI.com. The hang time was not very good. And also, if you look at his ratio of punts inside the 20 to touchbacks, it's also not very good. So he's a big leg who's not great at directional punting, which is why Tennessee declined to secure services, which they easily could have done.
And this is where, the Dolphins are going to improve this offseason. Short yardage, I talked about a little bit earlier. Special teams, they have been 30th, 31st, 32nd the last few years, depending on which tabulation you subscribe to. The point is they've been awful. And if they could just get to average, that's a step that they have to take. And so I'm curious about, Ackerman, what's he going to bring to the table? And also when you bring this punter here, I've read Tennessee's Flyers were awful. And so that didn't help his punt average. So there's a lot of moving parts to that net average that unless you watch the team up close, we're not sure about. So, that we're going to have to watch this play out. But the point is, these are the margins the Dolphins have to get a lot better at.
Are you being Mr. Roses and Sunshine, and I'm the one who's being the negative Nelly here?
I'm trying to be optimistic after calling Chris Greer the Liam Ikenberg of general managers.
Correct. Yeah. I didn't go that route, but I'm not quite because that was my first thought. I remember Stonehouse whoa, why would Tennessee not just simply, because even at the 3.3 tender, he would have become the highest paid punter in the NFL. So it's not like would have been outrageous. So I dug and I actually spoke to somebody who covers the Titans, and it's like he explained the issues there. That again, and I looked at the numbers. He's got a obviously
what I heard is what you mentioned, Alan, and that is he outkicks the coverage. Now, why is that? Why is he outkicking? Is that him? Is it the coverage? There's enough wiggle room that we have to watch for ourselves and see what happens here. And like you said, it's not even a given. Although I think if they sign a punter with a background with a special team coach, he's certainly got the leg up heading into camp if there is even a competition. Maybe Jake Bailey wants out of here too.
No, why would he? He's under contract. By the way, I see what you did there with the leg up, and I was about to say, like, outkicking your coverage is great for a schlub like me. When I married my wife, in that particular case, outkicking my coverage was good. When you're a punter, not so good. So, in very interesting news around the NFL over the weekend, the Cincinnati Bengals ponied up. We were talking about fiscal responsibility for T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, who will now become the highest paid wide receiver duo in the NFL, surpassing our very own Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And beyond the money, it's about these guys producing, and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle better produce in 2025 to a degree they didn't in 2024 if the Dolphins are going to rebound in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. Cincinnati is doing everything it can to accentuate Joe Burrow. Let's face it, Joe Burrow, you can sit there and say, well, he hasn't won a Super Bowl. He's been to a Super Bowl. He's putting up ridiculous numbers. And the fact they didn't make the playoffs even this year was the defense had nothing to do with his offense. But they're doing everything they can to accentuate Joe Burrow. And if I'm the Dolphins, I'm doing everything to, and again, this has nothing to do with Tua, but too much was on Tua's shoulders last year. They need to get a running game going. They need to get a short yardage game going. They need to do where, everything isn't about Tua. We got to help other, and if you get that others going, the passing game should get going a little better than last year too. And I think as I think about it, that why didn't the other Slowick brother come in here from Houston? And I think that's to help. Mike McDaniel, he comes from San Francisco too. There's a background with the Ryan Shanahan running game and offense, and I think it's to help put this puzzle to get back together for this offense.
Yeah, except, and Mike McDaniel pushed back against that idea when he talked at the combine. I am not necessarily always thrilled with the idea of having too many chefs in the kitchen, and because right now you mentioned, you mentioned Darrell Bevel before. This is a longtime offensive coordinator. Bobby Slowick was at the OC with the Houston Texans. Oh, and the Dolphins have their own offensive coordinator, Frank Smith, and Mike McDaniel, who's kind of the mastermind of the offense. That's an awful lot of voices, and at some point, is it too many voices? We'll find out. Interesting fact, if we're talking about devoting, because the argument could be made that the Dolphins and now the Bengals are devoting too many resources at the wide receiver position. However, trivia question, what team is number 3 in annual average salary for the wide receivers? Yes, the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, that's right. I did see that. It's interesting. The Cincinnati is at 69 million. The Dolphins are at 59 million, 58, 59. And where are the Eagles like at 50?
Like 57 or something, 56 or something.
Yeah. But the point being that if you have Joe Burrow, you're going to accentuate that. That's the way they're going to go. To me, you got to throw in the quarterback there. But with Philadelphia, they're the one team where it's everything. They got the best line. They had the best running back in the league this year, and they had two receivers who were both very productive. So, you win the Super Bowl, you're the model franchise that year, and Philadelphia certainly is this year.
Yeah, and if you look at the other model, and then if the consensus top quarterbacks in the NFL, Patrick Mahomes does not have an overly expensive wide receiver core. Josh Allen does not have an overly expensive wide receiver core, and Lamar Jackson does not have an exceedingly expensive wide receiver core. So is it that the Eagles are the outlier there, or that it doesn't matter either way? It can be done either way, and the Eagles are just freaks who just have the Midas touch, and everything that they touch turns to gold, especially in recent years. Not sure.
Well, are you surprised? I'm a little surprised Cincinnati signed both of them. They could have kept T. Higgins on the franchise. Now he's not going to be happy. But basically, when you look at the contracts, I was actually talking to an agent. It's a 2-year contract with T. Higgins. Okay, and he can get out of it after that, or they can get out of it after that. And so let's face it, the surprise that the Bengals did this is the Brown family spent the money.
Yes.
They're one of the mom and pop family run organizations in a multi-billion-dollar business. They're like the outliers. And so the question is, do they keep spending money, or do they stop there? And your point is, this is a smart way to build a team, with 2 expensive wide receivers. To me, it is, if you use them like Cincinnati uses them, if you use them like Philadelphia uses them, if you use them like the Dolphins did for a year and a half and the last year, certainly you can't go that route with that.
Yeah, and for the 14 different reasons why there was not more action down the field last year, and it was not as simple as the offensive line couldn't hold up. Tua didn't want to throw the ball down the field. Hill and Waddle weren't getting open. The defenses took that away. It's a combination of a whole bunch of different factors, and whatever it is, it can't happen again. Because the Dolphins, if you remove Hill and Waddle as major factors, it's just not the same team. We should mention the Bengals also ponied up to make sure they brought back Mike Gesicki, who it may come as a great shock to a lot of Dolphin fans, has been used as a de facto third wide receiver in that Cincinnati offense. I know you're shocked. Not inline blocker, really? Yeah, I know. Dave.
Yeah, and every time I see it's sort of like when I look at a Washington game and I see Michael Dieter standing there on the sidelines, and you're thinking, oh, that's right. And Gesicki, okay. But I throw in Michael Dieter probably to go to your next topic, which is I to see the name Ikenberg on the sideline standing like with Dieter. People so up in arms over them re-signing Liam Ikenberg. I get it. It was probably, if you were drawing up the scenario, it might be the best thing. Everybody moves on, right? On the other hand, he signed to compete for the 8th or 9th spot. He better be on the offensive line. That's the only way it makes sense. And it makes sense to me in that manner that you have someone who can, in emergencies, play other positions. Maybe not well, but he can play them and guard. And that's what you look for in a backup, an 8th or 9th guy on the offensive line to make the roster. And that's why I didn't get up in arms of it. Now, if it turns out the way things fall, he's starting, then we got a different issue.
By the way, Michael Dieter re-signed with the Washington Commanders, so he played well enough for them to bring him back. Liam Ikenberg, I wrote about him, again, on Miami Dolphins on SI.com, that I had zero issue with the move. I'm actually even a tad more surprised, if anything, that Ikenberg wanted to come back. Not because the fans are all up in his grill. I mean, constantly the amount of abuse he takes is ridiculous, but also because the Dolphins kind of moved him around all over the place, maybe at the cost a little bit to his development as a guard. Last year, I mean, Aaron Brewer injures his finger, and Liam Eichenberg, who you're projecting was going to start at guard, they have him moved to center to take the first team snaps. When to me, it's like, okay, how about you just have somebody else play center? This is preseason training camp. And then at the end of the year, he's rotating with the Isaiah Wynn after he came back from the quad injury. So I thought for sure Liam Eichenberg would want to be on the first flight out and never look back. Now, of course, he hits the free agent market I don't know this for a fact, and certainly not an agent or the player himself who would ever admit this. Possible that the market was dry, and
I'm
Liam
sure it
is like,
was. I'm sure it was for Liam Ikenberg.
yeah,
The amazing thing about Dieter and Eichenberg, Wisconsin and Notre Dame, and you draft an offensive lineman from Wisconsin and Notre Dame. Oh, they got the guy for the next 7 years, 8 years. He's going to be in the lineup. That's a good pick. Whoever it is, right? And yet, neither of them, both of them were not only busts, but at the center of storylines. Brian Flores' first blow up with his staff was 4 days into training camp
mhm.
when he fired drawing the blank on the offensive line coach. I ended up doing a column on him, talking to him
But
later in
when it
that
was a
season.
Panigamo,
No, it was I want to say an Irish name. I hate to. Can we even say that in today's world
oh,
anymore?
Flaherty,
Um,
Pat Flaherty.
yes, yes. And because Brian Flores said that Dieter should be in there starting. That was the blow up, and and so who was right? I mean, and then you got the Eichenberg. They traded up to get him, second and third round. I thought, wow, they to play left tackle, and now it's an issue. Can he even make the team as an eighth or ninth offensive lineman? But I'm with you. Maybe I'm giving too much credit, but I certainly didn't see them re-signing him to be a starting piece in this line.
Yeah, and by the way, Michael Dieter, be polite, be respectful. Michael Dieter is about to go into year 7 in the NFL, so I mean, he could wind up
Yeah,
having
no.
a 10-year career.
What we're talking about here isn't we're talking roles. So much
Sure.
of talking about teams is talking about the roles they play and not, how good, who they are or do you like them or not. I always come back to Jim Leland, the Marlins manager, being irate over Greg Zahn, the backup catcher, because Zahn started a few games and had a few, and he was mouthing off. And Leland goes, you know what he's got to worry about? And the writers are standing there, who knows, curveball? I don't know. And he goes, overexposure. That's
Yeah.
sort of what every backup or everybody, for a short period of time, they might be able to get it done. The problem is, can you do it every day? And that's where we are with Eichenberg and Dieter and the lot. Not can they have a healthy career, 7-year career in the NFL.
And on the topic of what market there is, brings me to Drew Rosenhaus's appearance on WSVN Sports Extra on Sunday, where he said that he had communication with the Dolphins about Emmanuel Agba. They have yet to find common ground. Basically means Agba wants more than the Dolphins are willing to give him. Also mentioned that the signing of Alexander Madison kind of having a similar skill set to Jeff Wilson as a more physical back than, say, Devon Achane and Jalen Wright, kind of shows the Dolphins have put a priority on Madison over Jeff Wilson, but Jeff Wilson has not closed the door on re-signing with the Dolphins. Translation in both cases, if they don't get better offers or any kind of offers on the market, entirely possible both players are back. And with Emmanuel Agba, who's a good, serviceable veteran, if you recall, last year he was on the market until July before the Dolphins called him after Shaq Barrett bailed on them, decided to retire. And then that's how they were able to get him. And again, he gave him some good, solid play. But there was no market for him before then. And if there was a market right now that was offering more than the Dolphins are offering, which is currently is not acceptable to him, he'd be gone by now.
Yeah, we're in the off-season business is being committed right here. So and some guys it'll be
Yep.
like Ogba, I'm sure it could very well be like last year. And the other thing is what's going on with Tron Armstead? Is he going to retire? That's what I assume. But who knows what's going to happen with him. So there's a lot of and to that point, Calais Campbell, what's going to happen? Does he want to come back here? If he comes back, you remember he wanted to be traded to a contender. I would
Correct.
assume he'll sit out and look around and see if a Kansas City or a Baltimore, where he has a background, or somebody else would want him.
Before we close, I want to get your opinion on this, because I had a different opinion than a couple of. In fact, it was Joe Rose and Kim Bokamper on WQAM, where I was a guest last week. They had a different take on this than I did. Do you see a scenario where Teron Armstead is brought back and is okay with being a backup?
No, first of all, I don't see it from. I don't see it from the Dolphins' perspective either. It shouldn't be. They made a second round pick on Patrick Paul, and the game plan was, okay, we're going to put him on scholarship the first year. We're going to get him ready to play. If you bring now Teron Armstead behind him, he's constantly looking over his shoulder, and it comes to one of the great thoughts Bill Parcells I always carry with me. Bill Parcells was great with lines and
A
thoughts, and
lot
one
of
of them
things.
was, he said the hardest thing for a coach to do is to look at a veteran and a young player, and the veteran's better right now. But if you play the young player 6 weeks or 2 months from now, will he be better than the veteran? And I think that's where you are. Look, if you go out in August and September, Teron Armstead's going to be better. Can you commit? Do you want to commit again to a guy you don't know is going to finish the season? And you got this Patrick Paul sitting on the bench. Good organizations draft guys for a reason. You got to trust the draft. So I don't see I hear leadership and all that stuff. If you have to rely on, if you need someone to patrol the locker room like Teron Armstead, and look, everybody respects Teron. This has nothing to do with him. It's the point in his career, though, where the organization has to turn it over to a young player, and they better find some leaders.
Yeah, and kind of their point, Joe and Bo, was that Armstead's going to want to make as much money as he can while he's playing. And to me, it's like he's been around for 11 years or so. He's made a ton of money. This is a guy also, I didn't say this on the air, but I should have, because it actually had dawned on me after the fact. It's a guy who's got a lot of outside interests other than football. He's into music. He's got like a business mentorship program that he does. So I don't know that he, quote unquote, as much as he loves playing football, I don't know that he needs football. He's got other things, and he's been a starter his entire life. So from his end, I don't know that he'd come back willing to watch somebody else play while he's on the bench. I mean, knowing as much respect as he might have for Patrick Paul, knowing he's a better player than the guy is.
Yeah, I can't imagine him coming back here. What I could imagine is him retiring, working out, and about mid-season when look at the Kansas City Chiefs this year. Could they have used him in the back half of the season to play the last 8 games, where you could cross your fingers and think he's going to be healthy for 8 games or whatever, and make it a run at a Super Bowl, something like that. If that means something to him, who knows? Who knows what motivates guys like that?
You have to say Kansas. No, not Kansas City. Teron, if you're going to do that, not Kansas City. My Chiefs fatigue syndrome is still acting up. It's still on the surface. Not Kansas City. Go with somebody else if you want. Would love to see him win a Super Bowl, hopefully with the Dolphins. If not, with another team. Not Kansas City. And by the way, I'll close on the Bill Parcells saying, because he had a lot of sayings, as you said. This one I hope doesn't materialize. But when he says, if they don't bark as a puppy, then I'm going to bark as a dog. I hope that does not apply to Zach Wilson, because he didn't bark as a puppy. Let's hope he barks if he's needed to come into action at any point during the 2025 season for the Dolphins. That's going to wrap it up for this St. Patrick's Day edition of the All Dolphins podcast. Thanks, as always, from my good friend Dave Hyde from the South Florida Sun Sentinel. You see his social media handle on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at Dave Hyde Sports. You can catch me at Poupar NFL. And we will be back here probably Tuesday. This is free agency time, so always something to talk about. Please like, subscribe, and until we meet again, we won't see each other. Good night.